been fascinating for me to see your journey too, because you now have loads of COVID extremists attacking you.
That's right, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show. Look, I mean, I've grown up in Australia my whole life, and the values that I've grown up with, I can't believe the scenes that I'm witnessing. And as you said in your intro, the media here has really failed to kind of show that side of the story and show what people in my country are going through, particularly in the state of Victoria. And to think that, myself as a wedding photographer who was, obviously working and then hit by these lockdowns, that I've had to go out there and capture these scenes and document that side of the story it just tells you everything you need to know about the media landscape here, who have pretty much just decided to become the mouthpiece for the government and, totally ignore some of the frustrations which we're seeing in the community, who are faced with these, as you put it, very draconian measures that we would have thought we'd never see in a country such as Australia. And that last footage you just played was at the War Memorial, the Shrine of Remembrance, and it's a symbol of freedom in many ways. And to think that unarmed Australians are fleeing from the police who are firing rubber bullets and tear gas canisters at them is a shocking image that you would never think you would see in a country like Australia. But I'm living it, and the world is watching, and it's shocking in many ways.
And Rukshan, why do you think the Australian media has been so compliant? Because here in the UK, I understand it because we have a regulator called Ofcom, and when the pandemic began, they essentially issued all of this guidance saying they would take it very, very seriously if broadcasters went against public health advice. But I thought Australia had a much more free media that wasn't subject to that sort of draconian state regulator. So why have the journalists been so pathetic and been so cowering?
Yeah, you're right. Typically in Australia, you find the media, they're very happy to kind of go after the authorities on a broad range of issues. And I think what's happened here is they've just made this internal decision to kind of not show what is going on. I would go to one of these protests, I'd film it, and there'd be thousands of people there. I'd come home and watch a nightly news, would say, there was a few hundred, a riotous mob of a few hundred, and it's just a total disconnect. So a lot of the decisions I think are being made internally just to downplay what is happening on the streets. They might have decided that this might just help in terms of pushing along our journey, our vaccine rollout, and all these kind of things that the government and the media are pushing very heavily on the other side of this.
And tell me about the smear campaign against you, because I've been reading a lot of attacks on you, when actually you were a wedding photographer, you weren't a journalist, you had your own political views, but hello, I think that's still allowed in Australia, right? So why are they coming for you?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of these left-wing journalists here, especially, and some of the state-run media here, they're a bit triggered that, someone like myself has gone out there and done some of the work that I think they're ashamed of not doing, and exposing these things and showing it to a broader audience who are, also tuning in and saying, wait, I haven't seen this. Like, why haven't we been showing these things? And I think that's where a lot of the attacks on myself come from. It's to discredit the work that I'm doing, and it's to show that, why would you listen to this person? He's just a wedding photographer. So, he's got some sort of other strange agenda here. We're the news media, we're the journalists, and we're showing you the actual story. And it's been very interesting because as much as the left-wing media here has attacked me and some of the corporate media has attacked me, a lot of the public has been very supportive in what I'm doing, and they've been very appreciative of the fact that I've been able to offer this kind of, this uncensored look at what's happening in their street.
Exactly. You've got millions and millions of views. You're now known as the real Rukshan. Is your career as a wedding photographer over now? Do you view yourself as a citizen journalist, or do you plan to continue this passion project once the lockdowns, hopefully, touch wood, at some point end?
Yeah, look, definitely the wedding industry is actually an amazing industry to be working in Australia. So I will definitely continue my business ventures there. But, this has sparked something within myself. And that's more so around being a citizen journalist, being a member of the community that the community can reach out and share some of their stories that the media here, for whatever reason, have chosen not to cover. See, with everything that's going on with COVID, what we're facing today is going to go in, into the next few years. And the ramifications of some of the decisions that have been made by the government here, those stories still need to be told. And
of course they do.
Besides that, obviously, and definitely. And I want to cover other stories as well. And, I don't like focusing on this particular issue, but if you're living in Victoria, in Melbourne, like COVID is the number one issue because it's affecting all aspects of our life every single day.
Yeah. Well, you've got to expose what's going on because the issue is that Australia, and especially a state like Victoria, went for a zero COVID policy. And folk like me have been saying for the past 20 months that a zero COVID policy will lead to carnage and chaos for years and years and years and years. And we're seeing that play out now in Australia. And that's why it's so important to the world that you expose it as well, because this idea that Australia has been some sort of COVID heaven is just a joke. But look, Rukshan, I want to bring in my panel now, so let me introduce them to you. It's the author and journalist Rebecca Reid, the host of Free Speech Nation Andrew Doyle, and the political commentator and writer Dominique Samuels. I mean, Dominique, look, there are some comparisons, aren't there, to what's happened here in the UK, because I know you've been a real freedom fighter, Dominique, throughout this time, and you have supported many of the anti-lockdown protests. But even in the UK, we saw a virtual media blackout.
Yeah, it's really, really strange because it is a worldwide thing almost, where it seems that the media in these countries that are putting in place draconian lockdowns all seem to be singing from the same hymn sheet, and the media is supposed to hold those in power to account. It's supposed to ask the real pressing questions, and I think that's what I've found frustrating about the political situation here. All the media wants to ask is, why not harder, why not faster lockdown, instead of are lockdowns the right thing to do in the first place? And I just wanted to ask, is this a sign of the times in terms of, citizen journalists actually telling the stories that mainstream media doesn't seem to be telling? Will we see more people like yourself going out there and telling these stories? And, does it sort of reflect the dire times we are in terms of the journalists that we have right now? I mean, not all are bad, obviously, but does seem to be a bit...
But a lot are.
Yeah.
Do you think so, Rukshan?
Oh, look, I mean, it's crazy, right? Normally we'd watch, video footage coming out of some sort of, let's say North Korea, for instance, of something that's happened, and you see that on like the mobile phone footage. But now we're seeing this kind of live streams and mobile phone footage coming out from citizens in Western liberal democracies. And, they're the ones that are sharing these stories to expose them to the world. The media in those countries, who are maybe, the fourth estate, holding these institutions like the government to account, are not doing this work. And it's come down to, citizen journalists like myself to expose these things. So I think it has been a turnabout in terms of the impact that, everyday citizen journalists are having during this time period. And you're seeing that across the world, because a lot of the footage that I'm seeing out of the UK, Britain, from France, wherever it is, Italy, it's all coming from mobile phones. And, there is a massive shift going on, I think, in the way that people are consuming media and, looking towards citizen journalists for a different take on things that are happening in their community.
Rebecca Reid.
With this kind of rise in sort of vigilante journalism, do you think there's any risk, given that previously journalists would usually need to have a qualification which involves legal training and then would be bound by specific press standards like IPSO? Is there any risk if you remove all of that infrastructure for journalists and just have people unfiltered, unedited, doing what is effectively journalism?
Look, I mean, there is an element of risk. I understand that when I'm live streaming, it's happening. I have little control over what people are saying and doing, and there's not that kind of editorial thing that you can do, right, during a live stream. But having said that, we're bound by a lot of the community guidelines on big tech. A lot of the platforms that we use, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, whatever it is, they have their own community guidelines. So we're bound by those guidelines, the same as the media landscape here in Australia and I'm sure in Britain as well. So I think that's kind of the balance there. But obviously, as things progress, even for myself, I've had to be more mindful in terms of the way that I do my covering. the things that I talk about, but that's more so around the aspects of community guidelines on social media platforms.
Andrew George, you want to make a final comment on this?
Well, it just occurs to me, I mean, I was in Sydney about 5 years ago, and they had these strange curfews where you couldn't buy an alcoholic drink after 10 p.m. because there had been some brawling in the town. It really shocked me that everyone just went along with it. I mean, I found a way around it, but, it did shock me. Is there just something about Australia that has a kind of authoritarian aspect to it?
Yeah, look, I never thought so, actually. Like, I always thought that, we're kind of that free-spirited, this kind of larrikin spirit, right? We're up for anything and these things don't bother us. But I think when push comes to shove, it's kind of being shown that a lot of people are complying easily. And it's been very easy in many ways for the authorities to kind of stamp things out. So there is a bit of that, but I think... yeah, it's really hard to judge what's actually going on here because, like you said, it doesn't actually gel with the Australia that we've come to know.
Well, you keep doing your great work. The real Rukshan Fernando, an absolute pleasure to have you here tonight on Uncancelled. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.